Shalom, Rabbi, and thank you for taking the time for this conversation as part of my program, Profiles of Faith. We're here today, Wednesday, the 30th of October, Kafchet B'Tishrei, with Rabbi Mark Wilds on Zoom. Rabbi, where do I catch you right now, and how do you prefer to be called?
I love Mark. You can go Rabbi if you would like, if it works within your program. But Mark is great, and you're catching me in my inner sanctum here at the Manhattan Jewish Experience. I've been sitting in this office for over 20 years, almost every day. I do a lot of my research and learning and meeting with my students, and it's my happy place.
Nice to catch you in a happy place. Rabbi, your accomplishments are quite spectacular. Mark Wilds, Rabbi Wilds, is the founder and director of MJE, the Manhattan Jewish Experience, a lively minyan on the New York City Upper West Side, also known for its educational programs for unaffiliated Jews. As a young man, Rabbi, you served in multiple rabbinic and outreach positions at Ohev Tzedek, Kilat Jeshurun. You taught at Ramaz and Stern College, but your crown achievement has been the Manhattan Jewish Experience, in which you engaged thousands of New York City Jewish professionals for the past 2 decades. In its 22 years existence, you successfully reconnected thousands of Jewish men and women to Judaism, hundreds of whom are sending their children to Jewish day schools. Operating from 3 Manhattan locations with a talented staff of 15 professionals, your inspirational Shabbat dinners, beginners services, retreats, classes, educational programming, holiday events, and trips to Israel have touched the lives of thousands of Jewish young adults. You also teach an outreach training seminar at RIETS, Yeshiva University Rabbinic School, training the new leaders for the future. How do you manage so much?
I love what I do, and I wouldn't say I get depressed, but I get down when I don't feel like I'm being productive and when I don't feel like I'm accomplishing. So I have big eyes. Sometimes it gets me into trouble, and multiple meetings happening at the same time and too much going on, and I get a little stressed out. But in general, I love being active, and I love people, and I love serving the Jewish community.
That's beautiful. Rabbi, you were involved in religious studies at Yeshiva University and worked to help Russian refusnik Jews obtain immigration rights. Yet in a parallel track, since your father and brother are well-known attorneys, you were on a trajectory to become part of your family legal legacy. You interned for Daniel Patrick Moynihan. You had every advantage to become a successful top attorney. How did you shift your focus to a rabbinic career?
I wasn't one of these, miserable lawyers that I was so uninspired, and I didn't find my work meaningful. I was involved in Soviet Jewry. I was doing political asylum work. My dad, I grew up, watching my father represent some like amazing celebrities and clients. And he was like, he lived for the law. My dad was a professor of law also for many years. So I grew up with a very positive image of the law. I enjoyed it. I loved it. But I got sucked into Jewish outreach. I ran a Jewish outreach program in Queens, in Forest Hills, where I'm from. I did this because I was in Smicha in YU. I was in rabbinical school at Yeshiva University, not to be a rabbi. I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to go into the family firm. But I fell in love with a particular rabbi. His name is Rav Parnas. He should live and be well. It was one of the top Talmud classes at YU. And I wanted to stay longer. YU wouldn't let me stay in the class longer unless I enrolled in their rabbinical school. So I just did it to learn. I didn't do it to be a rabbi. And then somebody convinced me to do the internship at the end of the rabbinical training program. I wasn't going to do that. That's for the professional rabbis. But someone said, you know what? Just do it. You're right. This way you can hang the degree on the wall. So I started an outreach program in Forest Hills, where I'm from, just to really check off the internship box and be able to, get that smicha hanging on the wall. And then I got bit. I got bit by the bug. I started this beginner service in Forest Hills. This is a long time ago. This is 1992, 1993. I just loved it. And I just got more and more excited about that and a little less and less excited about the law.
Some well-known rabbis took notice of you and invited you to help them?
Yeah, I got a call from Rabbi Dr. Jacob J. Schachter. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I don't know, like, how does he even know who I am? How did he know my number? I was like 22, 23 at the time.
I interviewed him on this program a couple of years ago.
Oh, so he has remained my mentor and teacher all these years. And he said to me, I'd like for you to come and teach a class at the Jewish Center on the Upper West Side. It's not for my congregants. It would be a class for people that live in the area but are not affiliated. And he started explaining to me, like, I live on the Upper West Side, and like there are thousands and thousands of young Jewish people that are not connected. Would you come in? And see, I was just, he had me at hello, so, and he was willing to pay.
A big salary, I guess.
No, the money was not great, but it was like to be paid to teach like a class. I mean, that was, I can understand being paid to serve as an attorney and do all the other things I was doing, but actually so I came into the city and that class turned my life upside down.
Then you invited to KJ.
Then Rabbi Lookstein called me after doing that for a little while. Actually, I was in OZ first. I went from OZ to KJ. I was Rabbi Alan Schwartz's assistant for 2 years, and that was an amazing experience. And Rabbi Lookstein then called and asked if I would be interested in coming aboard and being his assistant, which I did for the next 2 years. And then that got me into like the classic rabbinate.
Tell us about the challenge that you got from somebody who doesn't like to be public, to be well known. But tell us about the challenge. You told me that he told you, "I'm going to support you, but."
Oh, that.
Yes, that.
This is basically how MGE started. I did my 2-year stint at KJ, and I was at a real crossroads because now I'm 30 years old. I got a wife and a kid, and I got to earn a living. And, my time at KJ was just, 2 years. I was basically keeping the seat warm for my good friend Josh Lookstein. And it was time for me to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. And I was already all grown up. And I called a gentleman by the name of George Rohr. Many people know him.
Yeah.
He was a confidant already and a friend because every Shabbat I would leave the main synagogue at KJ and go upstairs to the 3rd floor of the Ramaz building, where I was actually teaching also at the time, to give a little Dvar Torah at the end of George's beginner service, which I loved. Okay. George would make fun of my top hat a little. You have to wear a top hat when you're in KJ at the time. So I called him up and I said, George, look, I can go back into my dad's firm. I got this other pulpit offer in Long Island of a synagogue, or I could try my hand at outreach. I could try to start something to engage young and unaffiliated Jews in Yiddishkeit. But I've never done it before. I've never raised a penny in my life. I don't know. And I'm not asking you for money. I said, I'm asking you for advice. He's a very wise person. And he said, give me a few days. And he called me back. And he said, Rabbi, I think you should do the outreach thing. And I'm willing to give you some seed money. But 2 caveats. Number 1, you have to do this full time. You can't do anything else. Number 2, he said, you can't count on the money next year. You can ask me, but this is a 1-year, offer. And by the way, he wasn't offering to pay the entire year's budget. It was a significant amount. It was about 20-25% of the first year's budget. And I didn't really know what to do.
But he said to you, you have to tell your father you're not joining the firm. That was the caveat.
That was hard because, he wanted skin in the game, as they say. And until that point, I'd been, dabbling in a lot of different, and I loved that. I didn't want to have to commit. I was like every other Upper West Side single. I didn't want to commit. So I just I'll do a little law, I'll do all this. I never have to really decide. I have problems with making decisions. My whole family is plagued by this. And I went to my dad of blessed memory. My father, unfortunately, just passed away about 9-10 months ago. And I went to my father. And in a sense, he was probably the worst person to ask because he wanted me in the firm. So why am I asking him for advice? But I knew that my dad cared more about my personal happiness. And I knew he also cared deeply about the Jewish community. My father was very devoted to a lot of important Jewish causes in his life. He loved the outreach program I ran in Queens that I told you about before. So I said, Dad, look, I have this opportunity. George was offering some seed money, but I'd have to raise more money. I don't even know if I can do that. And he's telling me that he'll only give me the money if I only do this, which means I can't do that.
I can't work for you.
I can't work for you. I can't come into the firm.
How did you react to that?
So he was quiet. My father always taught me never to answer questions quickly. He just pondered, and then he leaned forward, and he said, Mark, in order for me to help you, I need to first know, what do you really want? I got to do what I really wanted to do in life. And you should have that opportunity like I did. So I need to know what you really want deep down. And don't think about me. Don't think about the firm. Don't think about George. What do you want?
Was it the first time that you were forced to actually think about it?
No, I was thinking about it, but no one ever asked me. You know, maybe my wife, Jill. Anyway, I leaned back and I said, Dad, I really love to do this outreach thing. I think the Jewish community needs it. But I don't know if I can do it. I know I can be a good lawyer. I know I can teach well. I don't know if I can fundraise. I don't know if I can run a whole organization. And then he came right back. He said, if that's what you really want to do, then I believe you can do it, and I'll help you make it happen. And he matched George's pledge on that time. He said, I'll do what George is doing. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but you'll have tried.
So you learned the secret of fundraising. You ask for money without asking for money.
You ask for advice, you get a little money.
Well, I think that the reason I focus on that is because I hope that many young people are going to watch that and realize that at some point they have to have skin in the game, as you said.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision, and that decision which you made should model for a lot of people how chasing for money and fame is not always what is meant to be, because you became very successful at what you do, and
Thank you.
still look young and energetic. Anyway, thank you for sharing this detailed story. But Rabbi, let me first ask you a question about your work. The most important question in regards to the unaffiliated Jews in America is whether they and their offspring will still be Jewish in 1 or 2 generations. As someone said once, a Jew is one whose grandchildren are Jews. How does it look to you after 2 decades of working with this group?
You know, there's up and there's down. There's 2 things going on at the same time in America. I see every day young people with their eyes wide open, excited to learn how to read Hebrew for the first time in their lives. I see young people, particularly after October 7th, interested in deepening their understanding and their commitment to Judaism. And at the same time, I see many more Jews leaving the fold. And no one's leaving the fold, though, because they woke up one morning and they said, you know what, Judaism doesn't make logical and rational sense to me. It's a myth. It's not based on any validity. It's not authentic. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that people aren't consciously deciding not to stay Jewish. They're just not being raised in such a way or engaged Jewishly in such a way that they would even have a reason to stay Jewish. Nobody's rebelling. Nobody's waking up and saying, this is not for me. This is a load of malarkey. They're just not being put on a path towards spiritual enlightenment.
The gravity turned off. There's no gravity. They're floating in space.
I'll tell you a quick story, if you don't mind, which really illustrates it. I remember my stepmom at the time called me up and she said, you know, my dentist keeps complaining to me when he's drilling into my mouth. He keeps complaining that his son is rebelling and he's going with this non-Jewish girl and he's going to marry her and he's rebelling against Judaism. You know, I told him, you're an outreach. Maybe you would meet with the dentist and maybe you can help the son. So he calls me up, the dentist, and he said, Rabbi, My son is rebelling against Judaism. He's dating this non-Jewish girl. It looks like they're going to get engaged. It's terrible. Maybe you can help. And I said, look, okay, I'd love to see if I can help. I need some information, though. Tell me about the Jewish experiences that your son had. Rabbi, every Yom Kippur, I brought him to temple. We sat in temple every Yom Kippur. I said, that's great. What else? Rabbi, we fasted all day together. I showed him the place in the prayer book. We did I did this wrong. I did that wrong. We fasted. I said, great. Any Jewish camp? Nothing. I said, sir, with great respect, why do you think your son is rebelling? What's he rebelling against? His once-a-year experience with Judaism, saying I'm sorry, fasting, and sitting there in synagogue all day? And I don't want to, you don't want to hit a guy when they're down, but that's basically what's happening. And then we wonder how come people are not excited about their Judaism. We haven't given them a reason to be excited. And that's why Simchas Torah is just as important, in my opinion, as Yom Kippur.
And Pesach.
Yeah. I don't know who decided that the high holidays needs to be the one time a year where 80% of American Jews come to temple.
But I think there's a larger percentage of people who celebrate the Seder.
Oh, yeah. Seder that's true, is the most largely celebrated Jewish ritual, 100%.
I heard you once quoted the Rebbe about the 4 generations, the 4 sons. Tell us about this story, because it really is related.
So the Rebbe had a famous teaching. The late and great Lubavitch Rebbe, Zechat Tzaddik Livracha, taught that the 4 sons were not just 4 people sitting around the table, but 4 consecutive generations that you can see unfolding in America. He said the Chacham was the grandfather who was, in Europe, steeped in Torah, mitzvot, Torah values. But his son then came over on the boat, threw off the tefillin, changed the name to be a little more assimilated and acclimated to make it in America. And he said he was likened to we won't call him, the Russia, we'll call him the rebellious son who wants to make it in a new country. And of course, he doesn't send his kids to Jewish schools because he wants them to, be successful and be with everyone else and not be held back. So his son becomes a Tom. He's become simple because he doesn't have much knowledge of Judaism. And his son knows even less. He's a Sheinu Yodei Lisho.
This is the generation of our kids now who don't know how to ask.
Correct. But I want to, if with great respect to the Rebbe, I want to put a little positive spin on it because I know the Rebbe believed in this. We live in a generation where the next generation is asking. They want to know why they're sitting around that Seder table. They want to know what Judaism is about. People are looking for meaning and for purpose. And if they don't find it in their Judaism, they're going to look for it in Buddhism or some other ism. And they will find meaning and purpose elsewhere if we don't demonstrate how Judaism can offer you that in your life.
So there's a drive for spiritualism again. After the roaring 90s and the boom 2000, there is an awakening for spiritualism, a hunger.
Not for organized religion, but for spirituality.
That's what you find in your experience.
100%. 100%. Now, not everybody is so spiritually or intellectually oriented, but I'll tell you something else that's even more popular that we in the Jewish community should be working off of to bring young Jews in. Not spirituality, community. Nobody can turn their back on the power of the Jewish community. When you start coming every week to a minyan and people get to know your name, and then you don't show up for a week or two, and then somebody calls you, where you been, is everything okay? Or you lose your job, and all of a sudden, I knew that MG was becoming a community many years ago when somebody walked over to me and said, Tracy, she lost her job this week. What do you think we can do to help her? And she got a new position within a few weeks because people networked and helped her. And when people are alone or somebody, God forbid, gets sick, they're not dealing with it on their own. I can't even tell you how many, again, I'm focusing on young people. We focus on 20s and 30s, how alone people are in their lives. Even popular people who went to a good college and are doing nicely in their career, The idea of having this kind of like every week check-in with a chevra, with a community, with a spiritual, it's like non-existent outside.
I'll tell you a story that echoes what you're saying. All my sons went to Jewish day school, but really the formative experience was camp. They all went to Camp Ramah in the Berkshires. And one of my sons said, "Look, Abba, statistically speaking, it is not likely that we wouldn't have some destitute people. And yet we don't." And he knows hundreds of people. And he said, because we take care of each other and we stay in touch. And then they did the Ramah basketball league, and they meet and they do barbecue and they reunion once a year. And they're still in touch. We're talking about 15 and 20 years later.
Incredible.
The power of community is really strong. But as one of the rabbis I interviewed said to me, and it doesn't apply to Manhattan, because in Manhattan you're a captive audience. You're in an island within 1 mile to a number of communities. But if you live in the burbs or in the country and you are not part of an Orthodox congregation, which is the majority of Jews today, you don't have a community. One conservative rabbi said, the art of unintended consequences. We wanted to drive, and now we're all spread around.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you deal with not with the Manhattan community, which is easy to connect, but with somebody who lives 20 miles away from the nearest Jewish community? And we have, unfortunately, more than half of American Jews are that.
Everybody has to speak to their own competent halachic authority, for their own answer. But, as long as you offer somebody hospitality, they choose to drive or they travel on their own, that's unfortunately the reality. Chabad keeps their parking lots open mostly.
As a Chabad rabbi said to me, everybody walks to shul in my congregation, from the car to the shul.
That's very good. So I used to go to this Chabad when I would visit my in-laws at Blessed Mary in Boynton Beach. So he's got a sign in the parking lot: driving on the Sabbath is prohibited. We welcome all newcomers. So now I have found, especially with younger people, that once somebody becomes Shomer Shabbat, they may find a closer synagogue that's in walking distance. But in the initial stages, they have to get interested enough in Judaism that they would make that kind of commitment. In order to do that, you have to be able to, I guess, tolerate on some level. Be flexible. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying, again, if somebody comes over to me and says, "Rabbi, is it okay for me to drive on Shabbat?" I can't say that it's okay, technically. Even if they say it's only to shul. The conservative movement, they didn't say it was okay to drive to the mall on Shabbos. They said it was okay to drive to synagogue. Now, whether people are just going to follow, that's a different story. But it doesn't matter. Once you start saying that something is okay, it becomes a problem.
Our good friend, Rabbi Buchwald, once was invited to a big community where I was at, and he said, "I see that the parking lot is full, but the streets around the shul are fuller." And he said, "I admire these people." And everybody was looking around. Why? He said, "Because we have no choice, but they could have gone to the beach and they came here."
Yeah.
This is good message.
Rabbi Buchwald, by the way, I just want to acknowledge he's one of my mentors and teachers, and he helped me start that first beginners program in Queens that turned me on to all of this. And my wife is a graduate of his beginner service. But
and he helped George too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Rabbi Buchwald is a hero.
He married my wife and me. He has been an inspiration for my wife growing up. And I daven with him every morning. So we laugh together at all the mess he's done by allowing me to join in.
He's created a lot of mess for the Jewish people, 100%.
Rabbi Wilds, you're the author of the 40-Day Challenge, a daily Jewish insight to prepare for the high holidays, and Beyond the Instant, Jewish Wisdom for Lasting Happiness. In addition, you carry a whole slew of credentials: a BA in Psychology from YU, Master degree in International Affairs from Columbia University, a law degree from Cardozo Law School, as well as rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University. On top of this, you're a family man married to Jill, an educator herself, and parent for 4 children, who helped with MJE. I call it a wild team effort. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, I'm feeling a lot of nachas. Thank you.
You have a lot of presence online. There's only one problem with listening to you online, and that is it's very hard to stop. It's kind of addictive because you speak from Israel, then you're interviewed here, and you speak there, and I feel like, wow, the Sermon on the Mount, the sermon online. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
I heard you're responsible for over 400 marriages among your congregants. Tell us about this. How did this come? Are you a matchmaker?
I would love to say that I have that special touch that some shadchanim have, that they can take this person and that person and put it together. We have run programs for 26 years now at MJE, and we have about over 5,000 unique visitors a year coming through our doors. So if you just do the math, okay, there's about 23,000 people, some are repeat customers, attending events every year for the last 25 years. So just do the math. You just keep putting so many young Jews in the same room.
That's only 2%. You're failure.
Yeah, not great. Yeah. So like 400 sounds great when you say 400, but relative to, so it's not like my wife and I, now we do try to fix people up all the time, and we do, and we've had some successes. I would say our biggest success is around our Shabbat table. We have 18 to 20 people every Shabbos to our home. A lot of our other rabbis on staff do the same thing, maybe not as big, but a lot of people meet around our Shabbat table. And MGE is an easier place. The West Side can be a little intimidating for some people. MGE is a little easier to navigate, not because we have a schleppy group. It's a very cool, young, hip group. We're super open, welcoming, and warm. And we make sure that everybody has a name tag. I got that from Rabbi Buchwald, also turned Friday night into Shabbos. Everybody introduces themselves at the end of the minyan every Shabbos. I get up and I say, who's here for the first time? And they have to raise their hands, stand up. My name is Barbara. I'm from Santa Barbara. I live here in New York City, 10 blocks from here. And everybody claps, and then she gets welcomed at the Kiddush. We don't have one of these big mob scenes that you see in a lot of organizations where you just have to, unless you're super good looking, attractive, and have a personality, nobody talks to you.
I thought that's the only criteria in your minyan, right? So I heard what is Jewish humor, and it's related to matchmaking. So this matchmaker introduces to the father of the girl this young man, and the father of the girl says, but he has a short leg. He said, no. It's the other leg that's longer. So this is both Jewish humor.
It probably sounds even better in Yiddish.
Yeah, but I think that's our secret. Always turn it around,
Turn it around.
We had no choice.
Beautiful.
Rabbi, seriously, you see religion as a key to a value-centered life, while at the same time you acknowledge the skepticism people have. It appears like there is no objective values anymore. How do you overcome this obstacle? How do you dance this dance, or do you avoid it altogether?
I don't avoid it. I don't get into direct confrontations on the philosophical merits or demerits, if you will, of whether there's an objective right or wrong. What I try to demonstrate is that Torah gives us a path in life. Torah gives us a path for two reasons. Number one, there is an authenticity, a validity to it. I do teach tonight. I'm teaching a class at 8:00 on Torah min hashamayim. Why do traditional Jews believe the Torah comes from on high? I do think that's important, that people see that there's a reasonable, rational basis for believing in Torah min hashamayim. But the proof's in the pudding. People are looking around, and they're looking at people's lives, and they look at the Jewish community, and they say, I'll tell you a quick story that really demonstrates this. I have a student of mine, he did our fellowship program. We have a whole year learning program where people come on Wednesday nights for 3 hours. It's actually kicking off tonight. We did it in memory of Rabbi Lamb, who was one of my mentors and teachers of blessed memory. And his name is Daniel. And I said, Daniel, why did you join the fellowship program? Daniel is about 27, 28. He's a young attorney, smart guy. He said, I went skiing last winter I went with 2 or 3 of my buddies. None of us are religious, but there were a couple of religious families staying in the same hotel skiing with their families. And they saw we were Jewish, and they invited us to a dinner. They were having dinner in one of the hotel rooms. It was like Assyrian Jewish families. And I was blown away, he said, by the respect that these kids, who, by the way, were not on their phones. What teenage kids are not on their phones on a Friday night? They were sitting there actually talking to their parents. And I said, I want this. This doesn't exist. I didn't have this in my home. I didn't have this in my childhood. Everybody was on the phone. Everybody was doing whatever they were doing. And I saw that they were good skiers, but they started every morning with praying. I mean, I'm not so into praying, but that's amazing. How do you get a 15-year-old boy, to pray and put on the tefillin? He goes, look, I don't know what I believe, what I don't believe, but I want that. And I'm telling you, that is one of the most attractive things that we have that we don't even realize we have. We have beautiful families and a beautiful community. And even if you don't theologically believe in objective truth, following this path of life brings you to that experience.
What you're saying is every Jew is one invite away from being attracted.
Rabbi Riskin, and I heard this from Rabbi Buchbel, but it's from Rabbi Riskin. I checked it out.
I interviewed him too. Yeah.
He said, for the price of a chicken, you can save a Jew.
Yeah. It's interesting, something personal about me. I grew up secular. And when I met my wife in Israel, she is a New Yorker who went to Ramaz, and she was an observant girl. I got very enchanted. And when I wondered years later, why did it work for me when all of my secular friends would have, turned away and run for the hills? I grew up with a picture of my Zayde holding a Sefer Torah. It's actually behind me, and it's on my program.
I see it. It's beautiful.
And the stories about him. And I thought, maybe that picture alone had planted the seed in my heart. Imagine if he was alive, what a tzaddik I would have turned into. So I devoted this program just to be able to do what that picture did for me. Wow. So if somebody is watching this by mistake, and I've had over almost 500,000 views, and people tell me from all over, I walked into this house and they were watching this or told me about it. I want somebody who's never seen it before say, I want one of this, And I think that's your story. It's for the price of a chicken, you can turn a Jew's life around.
Thank you for sharing that.
In your book, Beyond the Instant, Jewish Wisdom for Lasting Happiness in a Fast-Paced Social Media World, you state a well-known truism, which is that most of what we pursue, money and fame, do not bring happiness. Your prescription for happiness is founded on giving, on doing for others. And while we do know the best way to help oneself is to help others, this value is in short supply in society. Quite frankly, I think that telling somebody who is not connected that the way to help themselves is to help others would not sound so great. It doesn't make sense. I want, but instead of getting, I have to give. How does this work? Tell it to me like I'm a 6-year-old.
Well, I will tell you, first of all, I always get a good response when I share that. It resonates immediately with thoughtful people. People know this. They react to it very warmly because they know instinctively, without thinking, that it's true. Because everybody's had a moment where they did something selfless for another person and they experienced that wonderful sensation. And everybody knows how fleeting the feeling of getting can be. So I don't have to do a lot of proving. I don't have to do a lot of explaining. What I do, in the book, in the chapter, I talk about the most studied town in America, Rosetta, Pennsylvania, where there was no alcoholism and there was no drug addiction, there was no crime, nobody was on welfare, and they had less than half the national rate of heart disease. In the 1950s, when middle-aged men were having heart attacks like crazy, they were not suffering from heart disease like the rest of the country. And when they brought the researchers in to try to figure out what it was, and they ruled out genetics, and they ruled out diet, nobody was dieting, there was a lot of obesity, they ruled out health, they were smoking, and nobody was doing yoga or jogging or running or anything like that. And they realized it's because they knew each other's names. They took care of each other. And they were also involved in volunteering. And everybody went to church every Sunday. These were religious people who were involved in civic volunteer causes. And they realized that the greatest contributing factor to good health, better health, is not diet, is not exercise, none of these things. It's living in a tight-knit community with other people who care about you and getting out of yourself, caring about other people.
It's actually, there's empiric research. I attended a seminar by Tal Ben Shahar, an Israeli guy whose Harvard class was the most popular, The Art of Happiness. And he shows all statistical evidence that the more positive your engagement with life, the more you do for others, the more things you do, there is real empiric results, not only touchy feeling. There are empiric results, like you say about the town Rosetta, that it will translate into a healthier, better, a more positive life. Rabbi, my program focuses on the transmission of tradition and heritage. Can you tell us about your family, your parents, grandparents, where did you grow up, and the major influences in your life, and who were your role models?
So those all go together, because my major influences were my grandparents and my parents. Unfortunately, they've all passed. But my mother's side was from Germany, and I'm actually named for my maternal grandfather, Max Schoenwalter, of blessed memory. He came with his family in 1939, and my mother was actually born in Liechtenstein. They left Germany in 1937, and then they came to the United States, and that's on my mother's side. And my father's family is from Białystok, Poland, proud Litvaks on the other side. And I always joke, when we dance on Shabbos at MG, we're like a little Hasidish, the way we pray a little. So somebody said, where does this come from? I said, well, my mother's side was a Yeki. My father's side there isn't a bone in my body that would want to ever sing or dance,
You're the rebellious child.
I'm the rebellious child. Well, my oldest son became he's a musician. He's like my hippy dippy son. So it's the funniest thing in the world when we go back and talk about, but my mother unfortunately passed away at a very young age. She was 56. She had a huge impact on me. She was probably my greatest spiritual inspiration. She was a deeply spiritual person. I loved watching her daven as a child. My father was also very, very committed to his Jewish tradition. I would say my father was more into the learning aspect. And they kind of mirrored their respective families from where they came. Like the Yekis were probably a little more observant religiously. Like my grandfather davened 3 times a day, but he wasn't as learned as my other grandfather on the other side from Białystok. He lived in a small hick town in Pennsylvania where my dad grew up, called Oliphant. Not so far, by the way, from Rosetta, Pennsylvania, that I was just talking to you about. And, I would speak to him on the phone, and it was always the same question. What are you learning? And I would, and by the way, he wanted to know like what Masechta and what Daf. Okay, it was very specific. So I would say, Bav Metzia, what Daf? And he would say, Aleph for Beis. And then he would say, the second Tosfos. He was quite learned. He was also just a wonderful, wonderful man. And he was definitely my father's greatest role model, my Zaidi, Harry Wilds. He had a store. All the Jews in that town owned stores. And he sent my dad to YU, which is a whole crazy story. My father was going to go to the University of Scranton, St. Thomas Aquinas University, where my uncle Jerry, he should live and be well, where my uncle went. And then he
could have been a parishioner.
Yeah. I mean, the joke is my uncle lives in Israel now. He's Blion Hara 95. And he was very bright, and he won all the debates. He was on the debating team in high school, and then he did it in University of Scranton. But the uncle of my father, who met my Zaidi at Ellis Island when he came to the United States, he said to my Zaidi, he says, you're going to send, and then he said my father's first name, you're going to send blank to learn by the Galachim like you did Jerry. Galachim is Yiddish for, the priests.
Go ahead.
my Zaidi said, listen, I just have a store. They have to earn a profession. He says, I can't just send them to yeshiva. And my dad had never heard of YU, of Yeshiva University. And this gentleman was living in New York, and he said, then send him to YU. My dad was enrolled to go to St. Thomas Aquinas University. This phone call was Thursday night. My father was supposed to start the next Monday morning at the University of Scranton, St. Thomas Aquinas. They got on a train on Sunday from Oliphant, Pennsylvania to New York to be interviewed at this place that they'd never heard of. And my father went with my Zaidi. You could just picture the scene. They took the train, and they come, and Dr. Pinchas Churgin, who was a great Tanakh expert, interviews my father, starts talking to him in fluent Hebrew. My father's sitting there listening. For 10 minutes he spoke. My father patiently waited for him to finish. And he said, Dr. Churgin, I didn't understand a word you just said. He says, but if you let me into your school, I bet in some time I could be able to have a conversation with you in Hebrew. He took my father with 10 other students who had no yeshiva background. And there was no remedial program in YU at the time. There was
He started the beginner minyan.
Basically. That's why my father had such a soft spot for a lot of things.
Amazing. Because your father was this famous professional. He looked so dignified. I'm sorry, like a waspish kind of a guy. And I always was surprised that you and your brother, who I know, have turned such committed Jews. But it shows that, as Reb Shlomo used to say, you never know. At least try. Rabbi, turning to a more difficult subject, tell us, how do you see, we just came out from the Jewish high holidays, the Atonement, Sukkot, New Year, and I'm sure that being in the role you are, you had to inspire a lot of people. But tell us, how do you see this process, and how it has this year commemorating the anniversary of October 7 atrocity changed the experience of your high holiday celebrations?
October 7th changed everything, not just for Jews in Israel. And I think it's made Jews in America, some Jews in America, get more serious about their Judaism and take their praying a little more seriously. We at MGE have seen a rise in attendance, 37%. We actually did a study. We have 37% more people coming to MGE today than we did a year ago, before October 7th.
October 8 Jews.
Yeah, October 8 Jews. Now, I wouldn't say that they're coming all the time and they're all putting on, talit and tefillin, but a lot of Jews want to be more affiliated. They want to be more committed. Some of them don't even know why. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story. Somebody came to see me, 24-year-old young man. He said, Rabbi, I don't know what happened October 7th. I've never been to Israel. I only go to synagogue on Yom Kippur. And I got into a fight with my girlfriend, who I'm living with. She happens not to be Jewish. And I was so upset about what happened with Hamas. And then all of a sudden, I see that my girlfriend is being very defensive about Hamas and the Palestinians. And I'm in a terrible, terrible fight with her now. So I said to him, well, how can I help you? And he said, well, I know that religion is all about forgiveness. So I'm coming to you to learn, how can I learn to forgive her? And I said, dude, you came to the wrong place. I said, first of all, in Judaism, we don't believe in forgiving people unless they do what we call in Hebrew tshuva. So if she sees the light and you can get her to see how ridiculous her opinion is, and she apologizes for being insensitive because your people were attacked, unprovoked, attacked, then okay. But this is a great opportunity, I said, for you to explore your Judaism. I understand you weren't given really a reason only to date Jews, and I'm not trying to say that Jews are better than non-Jews, I said, but this is an opportunity. He says, well, why am I feeling anything? I wasn't raised to feel anything, and I haven't been to Israel. So I shared the Rabbi, and I've been learning Tanya for the last 4 or 5 years. And I said that the Rebbe taught, based on the writings of the Baal HaTanya of Shner Zalman of Liadi, that there is a Pintel Yid, there is something inexplicable that's part of who we are, And October 7th probably triggered it. And if it wasn't October 7th, hopefully it'll be something that reminds all of us of who we really are.
Good for you, because I can imagine somebody else as answering, it's okay, you have to forgive her. And, I said that, the term zero sum game is usually negative, but if somebody offends me or my people or my family, that's where zero sum game comes into play. I cannot be this nice guy to everybody, as they say in Pirkei Avot. If you're going to be merciful with the cruel, you're going to be cruel with the merciful. If you'll be Rahman with the Achzarim, you'll be Achzar with Rahmanim.
And by the way, we're seeing that now. We're seeing people who are being merciful to the cruel, and they're overlooking true innocence and true, genocide. It's literally that Mishnah, 100%.
The world doesn't realize that we're not those Christians that turn the other cheek. Going to another angle of this, we're very, Kabbalah and meditation is very popular now.
Mm-hmm.
And they teach us that God is love, and that then we have October 7th. Please help us make sense of this anachronism, this contradiction. People used to say, how does God allow the Holocaust?
Yeah.
But I just let you speak about this topic because it's relevant now more than ever.
Yeah, I take Rav Soloveitchik's perspective on this, which is that trying to answer why bad things happen to good people, or why God allows, bad things to happen to good people. Because I don't believe God caused the Holocaust, and I don't believe that God caused October 7th. But we do believe that he had the power to prevent it or to stop it, to minimize it. And that poses a lot of issues for people who believe in a good, benevolent God. Why would a benevolent God not stop evil? I can give you an intellectual answer that in order for us to have free will, people need to have free reign. And once God, prevents, bad things from happening, then we just turn into robots or angels without free I can give that answer. It's not very satisfactory. Somebody said to me after my mother was stricken with cancer and she died at 56, it's just a turn off. So what I tell people is that we don't know. And I think this is the emes. I don't really know. But I can tell you that just because I don't know doesn't mean there isn't a reason. And that's where emunah, that's where faith comes in. And Rabbi Soloveitchik famously taught that instead of asking lama, why to something, which is an exercise in futility, because to really understand God's ways completely, you need to almost be God. He said, turn it around and say lima. For what? Because one thing we do have control over is not the circumstances, not the deck of cards, not what happens to us in life, but how we react to it. What do we do with that situation? So I can't tell you why October 7th happened, but I can tell you what we should be doing about it. And by doing and by reacting in the right way to tragedy and to suffering, we can bring some holiness and healing to that. We can't change it. We can't take it away. But I do believe that one's attitude towards a particular event can dramatically alter how we process that event and how that event impacts us in our lives. So if we're just walking around saying, how could God have done October 7th without going to Israel and volunteering, giving money to the IDF, supporting all the Israel-related causes, coming to rallies and events like, what we've been doing, I think that really helps. I do think it helps. Does it explain why? No, I don't think we can.
A lot of people find solace in saying, look, we're the only ones who are still around. Rome is gone, Greek is gone. Then somebody else said something very wise, but I still have a problem. He said, in order for God to take us out of Sinai and give us the Torah, he had to bring us to Egypt. In abstraction, talking about the nation of Israel is nice. But I always think, what about the people? Their pain, the mother who lost the son who lost the father. My problem is, I don't know how God lives with the pain that is involved in this process. I'm just, rather than blame God, I feel sorry for God. I don't know how these people who, Each one is a branch that could have had progeny down the road in years to come. How is that Jew gone, killed, burned, shot, buried alive? How do we live our life, even if we go and do all the good things you mentioned before?
Rabbi Schachter taught me this when I once went to him, and I asked him how to advise a student whose father was very, very ill. And he was asking me questions, and Rabbi Schachter came from around his desk, and he sat down, and he took my hands, and he said, Imo anochi b'tzara. He says, what you need to do with your student before you start getting philosophical is to tell your student how bad you feel for him and that you're with him and what can I do to help. You have to start with that. I think it is a little insensitive to say, the state of Israel, without the Holocaust, we would never had Israel. So 6 million Jews needed to die in order for there to be Israel. Now, you could say that about Yetziat Mitzrayim, about the Torah, because that's what the rabbis teach, that had we not gone through the pain and difficulty of enslavement in Egypt, the Kur Har Barzel, the Talmud says, it's like what refined us. So we could say that because we have a tradition. But you can't say that about anything post-biblical where we don't have prophetic vision. I'm only a rabbi. I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you why, the Holocaust happened. Now, is it true that the Holocaust, created a more sympathy in the world? Temporarily, didn't last very long. It got the United Nations for a short period of time to vote in favor of partition, maybe. But can I then say it was worth it? If I had a family member who died, I would never say that.
That's exactly my point.
That's why I think it's insensitive to do that. And I think we have to, the line is if we have a prophetic vision, that there's a tradition that Rabbi Soloveitchik taught this. He says that the exodus from Egypt, that whole period of enslavement of our ancestors refined us as ethical people. It made us sensitive to the pain and to the oppression of others. Right? There's nobody like the bleeding heart Jewish liberal. Where does that come from? That's not from nowhere.
The word ger is mentioned more in the Torah than almost any other term. Be sensitive to the stranger.
So there's no question that we learn and we've developed from these experiences, but to say it happened for that reason.
Rabbi, you're not a conventional Orthodox Jew, and neither is your minyan. Tell us how you see Jewish observance, your relationship with the different trends in Jewish observance, egalitarian, renewal, Haredi, and anything else inside the large Jewish tent.
Listen, I'm committed to halacha, so I feel that the halacha are the boundaries. But halacha is not just a restriction. It also gives us the model. Like if we can't figure out a way within halacha to inspire people, and we feel that the only way to inspire people is to go beyond halacha, then that is our problem. That's not the halacha's problem. That means that we have not been creative enough. So one of my teachers, Rabbi Riskin, he came to me almost 10 years ago, and he said, Mark, I have some funding from one of my donors to do something at MJE that you're not currently doing. What are you missing at MJE? Now, by the way, in all my 26 years of doing outreach and fundraising, that was the first and last time that anyone, including a rabbi, I mean, can you imagine a rabbi coming and saying, I have some money? So I said to him, I thought about it and I got back to him and I said, look, we do a Carlebach Friday night davening before our monthly dinners. We do 3 monthly dinners every month, west, east, downtown. So almost every Friday night, but on the west side, we only have the dinner once a month. And then we do a Carlebach davening before the dinner. But the other 3 weeks, we don't have a minyan. I would love to start a Carlebach minyan every Friday night. And Rabbi Riskin said, done. 2 conditions, he said. Number 1, I want you to do it at a time when Jews who are not Shomer Shabbat will come. So when Shabbat comes in at 4:15 or 4:30 next week, we still started at 6 o'clock. Okay, so that people who are not Shomer Shabbat will come. Number 2, I want you to use musical instruments during the months of the year when you can do that.
Wow, so Rabbi Riskin said that.
Yeah. I have a lot of people who make conditions with their money, as you can see. He said, I'm not giving you the money unless you do that. So I have a guitarist. I play bongos. I've been playing percussion since I'm 12. And I have other people that come when my son is here. He plays. And we put away the musical instruments at Boi B'Shalom, right before we turn around to welcome in the Shabbat Hamalka. And we say, Boi B'Shalom. I tell everyone now we're accepting Shabbat. We're putting the musical instruments away. But it's great. So I get that little music in there. But there are other things you can do on Shabbos. Rabbi Lookstein taught me this. Rabbi Lookstein taught that you have to constantly engage your congregation. They either have to be listening to something very interesting, your speech. You have to work hard on that, number one. Number two, they have to be davening, saying something either in Hebrew or English, or singing. You can't just let them sit there.
Yeah, Rabbi Lookstein knows, he's been doing it for 70 years. Music is good. My youngest son, maybe we'll get him this way. There's still hope. A lot of new age minyanim are using this. Romamu with David Ingbar, a good friend. And downtown, I think, music has always worked.
Music is great.
Judaism is a musical religion.
If you can't use the actual instruments on Shabbat, there are ways of, as long as it doesn't turn into a performance. I'm not into the whole, 3 people standing at the bima and everybody listening and then doing a big clap after.
The ones who do it right. Everybody's singing with them. It's engaging people to sing. Judaism has a lot of great values, but we are in this, we forgot that we've been around for a long time, and our 5 minutes in history terms has made us see things a little different. You mentioned Yitzhak Perlman in your book, telling a story about where he played the whole piece on 3 strings.
Yeah, I love that story.
When one of his strings snapped. You call it making music with what remains. Our ancestors lived their lives making do with little. How does this pertain to us in a period where we want more?
So it's a great question. It's harder to be happier today. The generation of Holocaust survivors who, notwithstanding the problems and issues that they had, deep psychological issues and problems that they carried for the rest of their lives, and some of their children inherited some of those problems and issues. Notwithstanding that, they were much happier of a generation because everything was compared to a life of misery. And when you're coming out of a life of misery and you survive that, you have an appreciation for the simple things in life that someone who's raised in affluence, just takes for granted. So I think one of the answers to that is to practice mindfulness and gratitude and to become aware of the simple pleasures of life. And that's what brachot are all about. That's what tefillah is about. That's why if you start your day by thanking God for having your soul, by coming out of the bathroom and making a bracha when you come out, and just acknowledging that the plumbing is all there's all these things that we already, I tell a lot of people who come into my office depressed and you don't realize how many things you have to be happy about that you're just fluffing over because you take them for granted. And then you put all of your happiness eggs in a different basket, in the basket of if I get the promotion, if I get the girl, if it's an if and when happiness. And you can't be happy with that because then you're just waiting for the next great thing to happen. And there's no contentment with that. There's no personal peace and satisfaction. We need to learn how to become happy with what we have and still be aspirational and still, be ambitious and look forward to more.
Good luck. But, I thought that we have so many brachot is that we don't get time to be depressed because we were saying so many brachos. But seriously, I heard something recently that really was so clear. We like to focus on us and our lineage, our own selves. They said, for a couple, if you go back 10 generations, you had something like 4,096 people responsible to you being here. Like you had 2 parents, she had 2 parents, their parents had 2 parents, and going on and on and on. It says, if you complain, I think your worst days are better than their best days. you know. Another topic that I liked in that you mentioned is you like to quote Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people." This is about gossip, and we call it Shon Hara, which is a major no-no. Why did you open your book with this quote?
Because I think if people can just, even if they didn't get anything out of the chapter, to realize how small we are by spending so much of our time talking about other people. Now, the question is, why do we do that? And we do that because it's a quick and fast way of feeling better about ourselves without having to do the hard work. Because, there's two ways of feeling good about yourself, I said in the chapter. One is to actually improve, and then you get a little nachas because I reached my goal. But there's a much simpler way, and that is by simply comparing yourself to someone that's not doing as well.
Lowering everybody
Yeah.
else. That's the caste. That's the caste system.
Yeah, and when you do that, that's why it's so. Why is Lashon Hara so hard to stay away from? Because it makes us feel so much better about ourselves without having to do the hard work. So I love the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt because what it makes us, I think it makes us feel like a little shallow when we realize that we're spending all this time talking about other people and not ideas.
I also think that rather than focus on the Chafetz Chaim's, Lashon Hara concept, we should really think about the other way around. Talk good about other things, because just avoiding from bad doesn't make you better. Do well. That's why we have mitzvot. It's very hard to have a fulfillment by just avoiding the pitfalls of life. If you do the right thing, that you get a little higher.
There's a whole machloket on that, sur meirav aseh tov.
Yeah,
The Rebbe was all about that through aseh tov, you will sur meirah. But that's a very interesting point.
Rabbi, we covered a few topics, but you had to choose one that is closer to your heart. What would it be?
Oh, of what? What are my choices? of anything?
Go for it. Like, snap your finger. What comes to mind? Don't think.
Music, Beatles. I don't know why. I'm obsessed. As I get older, I get more and more obsessed. I'm not really sure why. I got to meet Paul McCartney a couple of years ago, and it's just like, whoa.
He just went to shul.
I heard Yom Kippur. Yeah, listen, 2 out of his 3 wives Jewish.
and 2 out of his 4 partners are dead.
Yeah, well, I don't like dwelling on that so much.
Rabbi, for 2,000 years, people prayed to go to Jerusalem. How do you see the role of Israel today as center of Jewish life when our generations have adopted exile as home?
I think things have turned. I think in my own lifetime, I have seen Jews in general viewing Israel as the future. We pray V'techazena einenu b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamin, that Hashem should bring us back in the Mashiach. But look at the rates of Aliyah, which have only gone up since October 7th. And I see it in my own community. My oldest son made Aliyah, and my 21-year-old son, who's my youngest son, he just shared with his mother and I that he's making Aliyah and joining the IDF. And it's not such a crazy thing. 30 years ago, when I started out, I had friends doing it too. We all went for a gap year. I studied at Yeshivat HaKotel, and some people stayed, but now it's becoming more of the norm. And, Jewish history is really unfolding through Israel. And I think we're seeing that. I don't know if it's a fair assessment anymore to say that the Jewish community views, its existence in the diaspora. I think the center of Jewish life is in Israel. I think the center for Jewish scholarship is in Israel, Jewish activity. I mean, as much as I love what I'm doing and feel like I'm making a difference, Jews are decreasing in number in the United States, and not because they're all making Aliyah, but because so many are assimilating and intermarrying. And Israel, the numbers are going up. And every time you go to Israel, there's construction, there's another community building. It's crazy.
I heard a very interesting theory that, Jews in America in the 1950s and 60s were focused on learning Hebrew. Now, the connection with Israel, because it was hard to travel to Israel, was Hebrew culture. Now, when you can get on a plane, go to Israel for Sukkot and come back, maybe Hebrew is not so important. The connection with Israel is so easy that you don't need the Hebrew. Do you think maybe that Hebrew as a challenge for people to immerse themselves into? My wife went to Ramaz, went to Masad. She came to Israel in 1978 in Aliyah. She spoke fluent Hebrew. Within 1 week, she was working as a psychologist in the field in Hebrew. Today, that's not the reality. Do you think there is some connection there?
So I'm going to make a distinction between Hebrew for spiritual reasons and Hebrew for cultural reasons. I think Hebrew for cultural reasons, there's no mitzvah, I always say, to be Israeli. The mitzvah is to live in Israel. The mitzvah is Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. There's no one said you had to have an Israeli attitude. You have to have a nice dark tan. You can live in Israel and speak in English. And if you have enough of a community, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to be perfectly honest, especially if it's going to be an impediment for Jews making Aliyah or coming to Israel. Okay, now, having said that, I'll put my rabbi hat on. Hebrew is indispensable for our relationship with Hashem. And all you have to do is study just a little Kabbalah to understand that, and a little Tanakh to appreciate that, how important Hebrew is. But I don't think Hebrew is a necessity for the future of the state and people of Israel. I think it's a necessity on a spiritual level to be connected to Hashem on the highest level by using the 22 holy letters of the Hebrew alphabet through which God created the world, and the prayer book and Tanakh. But if you can live in a neighborhood and move to Beit Shemesh or move to Ranana, and everybody there is speaking English, and you can get by, nobody said that you had to be Israeli.
In Israel, you can speak English, but in America, I think Hebrew is more important. Just to get to that, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
my wife says when she was getting on the bus to go to Masad for the summer, they already started speaking Hebrew on the line on the bus, and they didn't stop Hebrew for the whole summer. So I haven't disagreed with anything you said, but I think on this one, I'll take a different side. I think cultural Hebrew in the diaspora is important as a gateway to our Jewish life. It's really like saying, show me who your friends are, what books you read, show me what language you speak to, what do you dream in, So that's my point. I think we spent a beautiful hour talking, and we can speak forever. I have one question and then one surprising challenge. My question is about the esoteric topics of Olam Haba, Mashiach, rebuilding the temple. What do you think? What do you feel? How do you see it?
I mean, look, I go back to classic traditional Jewish sources. Judaism is a religion of redemption. The ultimate goal and end game of all of human existence is redemption, is the enlightenment of the entire world through the teachings of the Torah. And I do believe, very influenced by the Rabbi, that on this topic, that every mitzvah that we perform, every word of Torah that we study moves the world closer, and everything in the opposite direction takes us away from Hashem. And I do believe that there's a cosmic power to our mitzvah observance, and that we should feel, we should do what we can to move the world closer to redemption. It's one of the 6 questions the Talmud says we are asked after 120, Tzipita liYeshua. And Tzipita liYeshua doesn't just mean did you, academically kind of think about it. What did you do in your life to make the world, better, closer to Hashem, so that we're that one step closer to bringing human existence to its ultimate goal? What did Hashem have in mind when he created the world? This was not it. It was the messianic moment in time, but we have to get there.
Is there a reason why Mashiach is hardly mentioned in the Torah?
Well, it's mentioned according to Chazal, it's mentioned many times in Tanakh, just not explicitly.
Yeah, well, the Rambam has this 2 ways of looking at Mashiach at times. Will cookies grow on trees, or will there be just a more enlightened reality? How do you see it?
Well, the Rambam's famous view is, Ein Bein Olam. He quotes Shmuel from the Talmud that it's a machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel in the Gemara. Ein bein olam hazeh liyamot Mashiach ela shibud malchut bilvad. That the only difference in the Messianic times is that we will no longer be subjugated. But think about, to the nations that will be no more anti-Semitism. Now, can you imagine that? Now you'll say, oh, okay, but everything else is the same. Think about it. If Israel did not have to spend what it spends on defense, and we didn't have to worry about Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, and we could just focus.
35% of its GDP.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
I don't even know. I don't even understand how Israel survives.
It's a miracle.
Like, just economically, makes no sense when Israel has to spend, whatever. But I don't know. I'm not a Navi. I don't know who was right. The Ramban says that, the Ramban reads those psukim literally, Nachmanides, that, the leopard will lie down with the lamb, that the nature of animals, the nature, and this is the Kabbalistic view of the Mashiach, that we will go back to the way we were before Adam Harishon sinned. We'll be like this angel. We will no longer desire to do evil. The Rambam doesn't believe that. The Rambam believes it'll be a normative, regular world, except no more anti-Semitism. I'll take either. I'm fine with either, honestly.
I'll drink what Nachmanides was drinking.
I'd like to have what he's having.
Yeah. So the last thing that I'll ask you to do is what I asked all the rabbis I interviewed, and especially since you're musical, I'd like you to sing something. From something meaningful from the tissue of your parents, grandparents, something that really you associate with your Jewish history, upbringing, or before you were born.
Whoa.
You weren't prepared for that,
Wow.
were you?
I was not. I'll tell you something. Can I start it with a story?
Yes.
I used to do NCSY, National Conference Synagogue Youth. And I used to do NCSY in New England. My son also did NCSY in New England. And we brought our group to the Boston Rabbi.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I waited in a room with about 60, 70 kids, high school kids. And the Rebbe walked in and he sat down and didn't say anything. He had a nice smile. And he just started singing this. And I'd never heard it before. And I've sung it since. So maybe I'll share this with you. And he just, for 30 minutes, he sang this. I won't do this to your listeners. He went like this. He says, Sheyabana, Sheyabana, Sheyabana beis hamikdash b'mehera, b'mehera, v'yameinu. Sheyabana, Sheyabana, Sheyabana beis hamikdash b'mehera, v'yameinu. Keeps going, and then he goes to the part. He goes, Visen chelkein. He used to say chelkeini. Visen chelkeini b'sorasecha, chelkeinu b'toratecha. Vesen chelkeinu b'soratecha, chelkeinu b'sorasecha. Shivana, 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 beis hamikdash b'mehera, b'mehera, v'yameinu. Shivana, 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 beis hamikdash, b'mehera, and just kept going. It was so beautiful. He didn't change it.
Amazing.
I've been singing that for years. I have another crazy, crazy story with a song. Do we have time for one more?
It's your show.
So you'll appreciate this because I know you're a big Karbach fan. So Neshama Karbach.
I interviewed her too. It's okay.
Oh, okay. So she's the daven at MGE. My wife were very good friends with her and her first husband, Steve, at the time. And I announced that we were going to Poland. This is 20 years ago for the 60th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Elie Wiesel was going with a whole group, and then we're having like the F-16 fighters, flying over. And I brought 35 young Jewish professionals on a trip to Poland. And right before the minyan was over, Neshama comes over to me and she says, "Can you do me a favor?" She said, oh God, I just want to make sure I have the song. So the low part, Ananai lalai ay alalai nanai ayalai alai alai. She said that her father told her that he composed that tune when he went to visit the camps in the 1950s. Would I please sing that song when I was in the gas chamber? Because he was actually in the gas chamber when this tune came to him. So it was like a little of a strange request. And I said, of course. I get to Poland. I'm with my group. We're in Auschwitz. I walk into the gas chamber. I look around and I'm like, there's no way I can sing anything. This is so inappropriate. But I made a promise. So I went over to two or three of my friends that were one of the other rabbis, Ezra Cohen, he's sitting in the other room. I said, Ezra, do me a favor. And my friend Moshe Bellows and Ozzy Cutter. I took him. I said, look, I told her that I would sing with a few people this song. So just do me a favor, come into the corner. We're going to sing it very, very quietly. And that way I can go back to America and I'll tell her I'm Yotzei Zayin. I did what she asked. So we go into the corner and we start, and then quiet. It was four of us. And then somebody else heard it and recognized it. And somebody else.
Before you knew it, everybody was singing.
Whole place. They sat down on the floor in the gas chamber. And then we were getting to the high part, and I was like, oh, we're going to do the high part. Right? I'm like, oh, she told me, Neshama, that her father felt the neshamas of the these were her words, the neshamas of the 6 million coming to him and saying, we have to go to Yerushalayim now. We can't be sad forever. And that's what inspired him. Every time I sing that song, and I sing that song a lot.
It's a good place to pause and take account of what our life has witnessed and what privilege we have to be involved in what we're doing, especially what you're doing. I'm forever amazed at the privilege we have. And thank you, Mark. And I wish you great atzlacha in what you do. We all need you to be matzliach.
Sally, thank you so much for the conversation, the discussion. This was really meaningful to me, especially being able to sing with you at the end. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.